So today we want to talk about decimal numbers. We're really starting out looking at decimal numbers. We're going to be talking about understanding tenths in particular. Decimal numbers are a lot like fractions in that they show us parts of a whole. Decimal numbers, though, are only going to be done in multiples of 10. For fourth grade, we're going to deal with tenths, hundredths, and somewhat in the thousandths as we deal with decimal numbers. So if we're thinking about a decimal number, let's think about just looking at like a rectangle. If I were to draw a rectangle, divide it into 10 equal pieces, shade one of those, we can see that that is 1/10. As a fraction, we write that 1 over 10. As a decimal, though, we would write that 0, decimal point, and 1. If we were to put the same number, 1/10, on a number line, 0 being the beginning of our number line, 1 being the last whole number we see on our number line, we would see that 1/10 shows up one spot over from the 0 when there are 10 spaces evenly between 0 and 1 on our number line. Same idea if we're taking a look, though, at these tenths. We've got a rectangle. So actually, let's do two rectangles here, about the same size. And we can see one is divided into 10 pieces, and let's shade all 10 of those 10 pieces. And what we see is that we have filled the entirety of the rectangle. That would be the same as saying we have shaded in one whole rectangle. What that means is 10/10 equals one whole. We could say it as 10/10 in words equals 1. Okay. If we're thinking about that in place value, we have our ones place, we have our tenths place. Here we would have our ones place. And here we would have our tenths place. See 10/10s here. What we would say then is that those 10/10s equals 1. So how does that work when we think about the place value? Well, if we're thinking about that, let's go ahead and just do this. This would be our ones. This would be our tenths. What happens is we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tenths in there. Well, this would be a column for numbers to put in. And what happens is that in a column, I can't put two digits in the same column. And so, therefore, I have to kind of regroup. And so what happens is I take these 10/10, and they get regrouped, 10 of them over into the ones, and it shows 1, 1, and 0/10. So let's take a look at some other fractions and numbers and kind of look at making them into decimal numbers. So let's start off with like 1 6/10. So if I'm doing that, here's my decimal number, my chart. My tenths here. I have one whole, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6/10. So I see that there's 1 6/10, and so I would write that 1.6. If I were to take 12/10, an improper fraction. Well, I already know from what I've learned with fractions that an improper fraction is going to also give me more than one whole. So here I know I'm going to have to do some exchanging just because it's an improper fraction. So these are my ones place. So my tenths place. Okay, and I've got 12/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And what happens then is these 10 get regrouped and so I have one whole, 2/10 left over, so 12/10 is the same as saying 1 2/10. Okay. If I were to have, we'll say 15/10. Okay. Well, again, it's an improper fraction, so I know I'm going to have to do some regrouping. Here's my ones. Here's my tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15/10. These 10 are going to have to be regrouped. So they go over into the ones place. So what I then have is one whole, 5/10 left over, so it is 1 and, that decimal point will always say and, 5/10. So let's think about it the other way. We know how to kind of look at them, and we've seen how they fit in place value. So what if I were to give you, I don't know, a decimal number, 0.9? Well, how many tenths is that? Well, if I read the number, it says 9/10. So I would just simply say that this is 9/10. That one's pretty easy. But what if I had like a whole number? I don't know, 4 3/10. And I wanted to find out how many tenths that was. How many tenths is that? Well, let's go back to that idea of a place value chart. Put in my place value chart here. So I'm going to put in my ones and my tenths. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4 ones, and I have 1, 2, 3 tenths. Well, to find out how many tenths there are in 4 3/10, I'm going to kind of do a backwards regrouping. I'm going to look at each one, and it's going to get regrouped as tens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I'll regroup this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'll keep doing this. Regroup this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'll regroup this one. Because I can do this because one whole is 10 tens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now if I were to count all of these, I'm going to count them by tens. 10, 20, 30, 40, 1, 2, 3. So 4 and 3 tenths is the same as saying 43 tens, or 43 tenths. 43 tenths. All right. So we're going to be working more with decimal numbers. These are tenths. We're also going to work with hundredths, and we'll talk a little bit about thousandths. So we'll practice some of these in class, and we'll work some more on this. These are, remember that tenths, hundredths, and thousandths, they're all decimal numbers. They're like fractions in the fact that they are showing parts of a whole, but we only count by multiples of 10, 100, or 1,000 when we're dealing with them.